moving hives out last night. I actually had to turn off the radio because of the endless loop of nonsense. So I downloaded a Joe Rogan with Alex Jones and I listened to that instead. One more yard to put down here and all my girls will be back out. If you can believe it or not. I can't believe it. Pull the pin, bring them in too early. Just to have to move them back out. But, you know, I'm not married to my decisions. That's one thing I can do is adjust on the go. Boy, we have some nice days ahead of us that just keeps improving as we go, but then right after those nice days the hammer's going to drop and we'll be right back into cold and snow, so there'd be no forgiveness. But whatever, I've worked through that type of weather before. Just as long as I can get these girls out and flying, because they did not look good in the shed yesterday. The last couple loads I had a lot of bee drop, and that is not acceptable. When I have the conditions to allow them out and flying and the ability to move them out into that, and I got to take that. So always awkward moving these nukes, not as quick and streamlined as my singles, but they will be out and that'll be it. The bees are out. The shed is empty. Look at all the bee drop. This is from yesterday. So much drop. So what we're going to do is get this shed swept up, washed down again, and start bringing the girls back in Friday evening. Let everything fly for a couple of days, shake this nice weather, and try to get things in before this forecast of blizzard. Sure is a good thing I like to work. Feels good to have all the bees out now. Just I know that They are going to all come back in about 2 days. So be it. All these nukes are finally out. It was painful watching these hives inside through that warm weather. And we had a lot of bee drop. So, you know, all things considered, I made the right choice. I don't know if to do it again this fall, I don't know if I would to choose to do things any differently. Just the cold, like real cold, and snow and wind, and I was getting caught with frozen down hives again, and you know the forecast, that looming dump of snow. Like Western Canada got a dump of snow, we missed that one. We missed a dump of snow just south of us, so you just don't know. Girls are up and flying now. I have a lot of question from beekeepers asking, you know, what are those conditions you're looking for when you're deciding to bring the hives in, or you know, to winter indoors in general. And so there you go, there's one big one. You can't have these mild spells come through and overheat that shed, where you're thinking to yourself, shit, these hives would have been better off outside. So you can handle like 1 or 2 of those through the winter, but if you're going to get them every month, every second week, you're going to get a warm spell come through, then you might as well just winter bees outside, right? So you have to understand that in Manitoba, we have cold. Not only cold, but we have continuous cold. So one of the ways we manage that cold is by bringing them inside into shelter. So we kind of induce 5.5 months of complete confinement, which our winter practically is anyways. And then we set them out in the spring and let things restart. I already hear the life in the air. Just love that sound. Some guys have cooling units. You know, I know there's some beekeepers further south that use these big potato sheds in Idaho and places like that, where they move these massive amounts of bees inside these potato shelters, and they manage the temperature of the building exactly with these huge coolers. That works. That's a big investment too. I've considered putting a air conditioning unit onto my winter shed too. I penciled it out. Just we have other places on the farm to spend the money. You know, typically Mother Nature provides that for us. And if we can just get through 1 or 2 of these warm periods, then we don't need a cooling unit. And I'm not afraid of a little bit of work when I make the wrong decision and have to bite the bullet and, you know, back up a little bit. But this is good. I'm not complaining about this weather whatsoever, as long as we don't continue to get this all through winter. But this flight, this is an important one, and I'm glad we're getting this. And it's just not one day. All we need is 1 day for these bees to get up and fly, but they're getting like 2 or 3, 4 days of awesome flight. But everything balances out, right? The concern now, as I talk about the problem of all this, whoop, gotta catch that. Come back here. That's how I lose the paint on my truck. But the flip side is this warm weather possibly will, you know, get that queen stimulated a little bit, get those bees energized a little bit. And as we've seen in the colony that we dug into yesterday, little patch of brood. We don't want that patch of brood to expand too much just before winter. The other thing is, I've had some question about putting out supplement just to give the bees something to feed on. And I'll do that in the spring. Very specifically, I'll put supplement out in the spring, but I will not do that late in the season like right now. Two reasons. The one reason is we don't want them to bung their guts up just before we put them in for long confinement. But the second reason is there is no pollen out here. There is no chance of pollen, not until next spring. So we will feed that supplement to the bees in the spring just to get the queen up and going, because we anticipate pollen to be flowing right smartly. This time of year, we don't want to stimulate that queen, or we don't want to excite those bees to rear brood on incomplete feed. That pollen is not going to come in to, round out their diet. So they're going to have to find that from somewhere else, which is internally. And we don't want to be mining the resources off these bees now. Now is not the time to do it. We want them to do this throughout the later half of winter into spring, on the anticipation of pollen, fresh pollen coming in to provide them that rounded diet. I see supplements as an incomplete feed. We need that factor X to be able to raise bees. We can't do it just pure on supplement. So we have to focus our supplemental feeding around pollen, around that resource that we can't duplicate. We have to focus the whole feeding strategy around that. So if that factor X isn't going to be in the equation this time of year, then don't feed your bees supplement, right? Allow them to shut down. They need to naturally shut down. And when you start seeing that natural pollen coming in, which represents that factor X, then you start feeding supplement. Give them all those bulk nutrients they need, because they can extract that factor X from externally, and they don't have to rely as much internally, because if they can't find it externally, they'll take it from internally. Then that cycle starts to ignite, and you start losing the longevity of those winter bees. Let there be flight. Holy smokes. This feels like spring. That first spring flight, same thing, same energy, same purpose. I just love it. All that work, I made the right choice moving them back out. Just help them endure this winter. Love it. Oh boy, and my pig pen is a buzz of bees. I set a bit of syrup out for them. They don't seem to be overly interested in the syrup. But they're going crazy over the pig feed. Look at that. Bees love cornmeal. Pigs are pissed. Get out of that syrup. They are not pleased. you are going to have to eat at night. Oh. You don't like getting stung either. Oh boy. Sorry, girls. Oh no. Tough lesson. Those are honeybees. You can learn a lesson too. Or a bee. This is the bee drop from the last 2 days in the shed. Kind of like the Walking Dead. Their time was not up, but they just spent themselves because of the poor conditions inside. Casualties. Holy smokes, what a day. It is windier than hell, but unlike that other windstorm that come through, this yard is protected by the trees here, and it's actually calmed this yard and has allowed these bees to get up in free flight. This yard is busy. One of the problems with setting hives down all together like this, and as you can see, I set them down in straight rows, all facing basically the right same way. Yards like this, I'm just in a hurry, so I'm side by side. So I got to worry about drift. So I kind of set my yards down, pointing this way, pointing that way, and that helps. Orientation that way. Everything's different colors, that helps. Bees have an amazing way of navigating, so I tap into that spirit too. Just there's a tendency for bees to drift from one side to the next, where they focus on one hive, leave other ones. If the queen smells real nice, they have a tendency to get drawn to it. So when there's a huge frenzy of flight like this, they're all up in the air. They come down and they have trouble figuring out which one is their actual hive. They start picking their preference. And if the wind drifts them to one side of the yard, they'll pick their preference over there because they get lost. Or if they're a big cloud of bees like this, they might smell a queen that they really like and maybe focus on a hive like that. That's kind of what it looks like. This is probably just a big hive. I don't think this is drift, but that's kind of what drift looks like. Concentration of bees around a few hives within the yard. So I'm always watching for that as I'm setting my hives out, putting them into placements. So I'm going through this yard and I'm not seeing too much trouble that way. Look at the cloud of bees, it's just amazing. I'm not seeing the bees favoring one side or the other. Seeing nice, organized, casual flight, even throughout the yards I set out. See, they're in the syrup feeder. That also helps. You give them something to focus their attention on, so when they leave their hive, they go out on a mission, they gather it, and they come back to it, rather than this aimlessly drift, looking for things and just kind of drifting back. Give them purpose and they're more likely to stick. Here's another. That's kind of what drift looks like too. You know, they've obviously come out of a hive somewhere and they're coming back and they got lost and they think they should be able to get into that spot there, but they can't. Oh, this is busy. Busy, busy. So it kind of scares me a little bit to put a lot of bees down into a place like this because you just overload the yard with bees. These guys I set down this morning. So they're out in free flight, just like the spring. This is springtime feeling of bee flight. Just that awe-inspiring, everybody's up and flying.